Hello and welcome. The readings for the 15th Sunday after Trinity are given to us as Matthew chapter 20, beginning at verse 1. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire labourers for his vineyard. And after agreeing with the labourers for the usual daily wage, he sent them into the vineyard. When he went out about 9 o'clock, he saw others standing idle in the marketplace. And so he said to them, "You also go into the vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right." So they went. And when he went out again about noon, and about 3 o'clock, and did the same. And about 5 o'clock he went out, and found others standing around, and he said to them, "Why are you standing here idle all day?" And they said to him, "Because no one has hired us." And he said to them, "You also go into the vineyard." When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his manager, "Call the labourers and give them their pay, beginning with the last and then going to the first." And when those hired about 5 o'clock came, each of them received the usual daily wage. Now, when the first came, they thought they would receive more, but each of them also received the usual daily wage. And when they received it, they grumbled against the landowner, saying, "These last worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat." But he replied to one of them, "Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for the usual daily wage? Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give this last the same as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me?" So the last will be first, and the first will be last. This is one of those wonderful passages where, however often you hear it, you are surprised, because we're in the hands of a God who wants to blow up the human systems. We live in a culture which greatly prizes justice and fairness and equality, and here is Jesus not being particularly just, not being fair, and not treating people equally. Instead of justice, he chooses generosity. Instead of fairness, he chooses generosity. Instead of equality, he chooses generosity. A lot of people expect justice from God and are surprised when he offers generosity. It's easy enough, of course, to accept it for ourselves, but when he offers generosity to others, then that's a test of our love. If we have love, then we are delighted. If we don't have love, then we're cross. So God's generosity is a test of our own hearts. But of course, Jesus does this as a way of showing what the kingdom of heaven is like. God always chooses the weak in preference to the strong. So when we look at the children of Israel, he could have chosen the Philistines. They were a splendid race, full of artistic creativity, or the Egyptians. But he chose the Jews, so nobody could say these people did it by themselves. They were a power of their own. Everyone would look at them and say, how on earth did this tiny, tiny group of people have such extraordinary spiritual resources and survive and flourish as they did? It must have been God. When he chose David, David had far better brothers, more handsome, more strong, more experienced, perhaps even more moral, since David was not the most moral of kings. But in the end, God chose David. And he used David, and then people would say, well, clearly it wasn't David, it was God. And so it is with us. When St. Paul talked to the Corinthians, he said, not many of you were rich or wealthy or well-positioned. God chose what is humble, because he can show his love and his power and his mercy in the broken and the weak and the downtrodden much more clearly than he can show it in people who have the fullest range of talents and abilities. You remember that St. Paul said, my power, he heard God saying to him, and when he asked for help, my power is made perfect in your weakness. And St. Paul said, well, in that case, I'll stay weak. In that case, I will look for your power and be weak. And of course, When you're weak, you are thrown onto God. When there's very little you can achieve by yourself, you pray. When you know that only God can help you, you turn to him. And so those who are last will be first, and those who are first may end up as last. None of us can stand before God with righteousness or with a moral record that we can put before him to be proud of. On the contrary, what God does is he takes the broken and the forgiven and he fills them with grace. And those who have been forgiven most find themselves at the head of the queue of those who are praising him. Those who are forgiven most love most. As Jesus said to the Pharisee, why does this woman adore me as she does? Because she has been forgiven most. In her weakness, God's power is made known. In her forgiven sin, God's grace is made explicit. It is the forgiven who are most grateful, the forgiven who most love, the broken and the failed who most show God's mercy. This is the kingdom of heaven. And for all human beings' attempts to make a society that is equal and just and fair, God subverts it. Nietzsche was right about Christians. There is something rather weak about us. We could rely on our own strength, on our own intellect, on our own power and muscle, but what we discovered is that really doesn't take us very far. In fact, the ground collapses under our feet. There's always somebody around who's bigger or stronger or cleverer than us. But there may not be anyone around who is more forgiven or more grateful or more in love than us. And so God's mercy subverts power. There is a certain kind of weakness, but it's a weakness that is associated with love. And in the human condition, power and love always struggle against each other. And God is not on the side of power, he's on the side of love. The church flourishes best when it gives up power and it chooses love. And so we are the forgiven, we are the grateful, we are the ones whom he has been unjustly kind to. God is just. He never takes away anything that he has promised. He never underplays what he has promised. He always delivers. But he's unjust in his love and in his mercy. He can sometimes offer those who throw themselves on his love and depend upon him such grace, such kindness, and we know we don't deserve it. This is what it is to be a Christian. The last will be first and the first will be last. God will upend and turn over all the hierarchies of power, all the flat platforms of equality, and he will replace them with love and mercy and gratitude. That is what it is to be a Christian, to be forgiven and full of love and praise, because God has behaved so unjustly towards us. He has lavished his generosity and his mercy on each one of us. And we respond with praise and with gratitude. And we offer him the whole of our lives. And the more he has forgiven us, the less we will ever hold anything back. To him be the glory forever and ever. Amen.